At the Julian Way, we empower individuals with disabilities to thrive in faith communities by breaking barriers and fostering belonging. Your support helps us create accessible spaces where everyone feels valued and seen. Join us in making a difference today at www.thejulianway.org. Together, we can build communities of belonging.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Palsies with Palsies. I'm your palsy, Bekah and Anderson.
And I'm your palsy, Justin Hancock. Hello, Rebecca.
Hey, Justin, how's it going?
It's going good. We had an off-air discussion about why you were there. About how it feels very midweek Wednesday blah sort of vibes.
Yep. We are both having the midday Wednesday. Oh God, the week is only halfway over. What do?
Yeah. The let my 44-year-old self be a 10-year-old now and just say I don't want to.
Yep.
But
so we
I
decided to record a podcast instead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm looking forward to a podcast on a very timely subject to kind of break up the monotony. So I am excited to be in this space with you and our listeners in this moment.
Yeah, same. So I had suggested that it might be a good time to have a conversation about ordination and disability. And as you say, it is timely in that, let's see, this show will come out at the end of March. So at the beginning of March, I had what is called an ecclesiastical council, which in my denomination is kind of the dissertation defense of the ordination process, but not as stressful, but plenty stressful, I think, where I present myself and my ministry and get asked questions about it, and then a group of church folks vote on whether or not I get to be ordained. And I was approved for ordination, so that is very exciting. And
Hooray!
Thank you. I have an ordination coming up in April. And, you know, as I've been going through this process and going through these final steps of the process, I've done a lot of thinking about the process, and I have kind of throughout. But you know, I think especially as I near the culmination of it, it's something that I've thought about a lot, about how important it is to have disabled clergy, right? You know, if we are moving within church systems that have clergy, when all of them or most of them are non-disabled, that really says something about who is expected to be a leader and who is expected to hold spiritual authority. And you know, it has meant so much to me to have disabled pastors as role models, and there is something just so awe-inspiring in not awe at me, but just awe at God and the church, and that I get to be one of those people that other disabled people can look at and be like, look, disabled clergy.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I want to piggyback on that. I think it might be useful to take us a half step back, and if there are listeners that are like, what are these words they're using? Is this a druid spell I need to be aware of? No, that's the next room over in our D&D podcast.
I cast ordination.
Yeah. Oh, we're gonna do something with that. That will come up at a certain point in our role-playing game, I can assure you. Um, However, if we don't have listeners who are, I mean, if we have, let me say that clearly, if we have listeners who are not familiar with ordination, I want to take a minute and kind of define that and kind of talk about that, the differences in our individual context. But I'm happy
Yes.
to define it as best I know, and I'm happy to let you take a run at that as well. But I want to do some scene setting first.
Totally. Yeah, please tell me what is ordination to you?
Yeah, ordination to me, at least in the Methodist context, the definition of ordination and what it entitles you to is going to vary fairly broadly from denomination to denomination with some consistencies here or there.
Hmm.
But in my context as a United Methodist, I view ordination as not making me a better, like, because I'm ordained doesn't mean I'm a super Christian.
Hmm.
It's just a way of marking the work of the Holy Spirit in my life that I am set aside to teach and preach and live out the gospel in a very specific or in a very uh, marked way. Like
Hmm.
my ordination doesn't make me special, but it does call me to a higher standard because it is a way of showing the rest of the world that the what God has called me to is to teach and preach. Um,
Hmm.
and I know like my worship and my ecclesial scholar friends are gonna go, you didn't go nearly deep enough on that.
Yeah.
That's not really right. But
Mm.
they're not on the podcast, and we are.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's the best I can do. Um, and I know,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, and then we'll go into the processes. I'm sorry, go right
Mhm.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I would say that's very similar to how I understand it as well. I think I would also add that it's marking the work of the Holy Spirit and the call to preaching and teaching in our lives. But it's also about the church recognizing that work of the Holy Spirit. That in the UCC in particular, um,
Yeah,
there's a strong emphasis on the person seeking ordination is discerning their call, and the church is discerning that person's call as well. That it's a work of prayer and an intentional conversation to figure to for that group of people to decide, do they feel like this person is called. And so for me, it's part of what's so powerful about ordination is I believe that the Holy Spirit is at work in my life, and I can see that and feel that call to me. Um, but it's also that the church recognizes and affirms that and says, yes, we believe this is happening as well. And I
yeah,
name that because I think there are a lot of people in the world who are called in some direction that would be clergy like, that are called to teach and preach and to live out the gospel in these ways, that don't have a body that recognizes that call in them. And so
yeah,
I think ordination is such a privilege because the people who get to be ordained are the people not just who are called, but who the church recognizes.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and I mean, we can go into each other's processes as much or as little as we like, but I'm
Hmm.
not really like in. in the Methodist system, you go into certain rooms, you go into a doctrine room, you go into a room about your ecclesiology, and you get asked a lot of questions with varying degrees of fear and trembling um, from the persons that I know gone through it.
Mhm.
But hearing you respond, I mean, I would love to hear about your process because it's so fresh for you.
Yeah.
You triggered something in my memory that was really hit me really hard just now. Uh,
Mm.
I knew I wanted to be ordained from a very early age, partially because that was the concept I had of ministry at the time, and I thought
Mm.
being in ministry was being a pastor uh,
Mm-hmm.
of a church. And even though I kind of evolved that, I always hung on to my desire to be ordained. Uh,
Mm.
but I don't think it's possible to be a 20 something year old person in seminary and not look at some of this with sort of a cynical slant,
Eh.
especially when you know how hard it's been for some folks
Yeah.
who are deeply qualified or appear to be deeply qualified and still struggle, which
Mm-hmm.
we'll get to momentarily, I assure you. Um, but so I walked in, so I did the thing, and in the Methodist Church we're commissioned for 2 years, which means we're sort of like on a residency type schedule.
Mm-hmm.
We can call ourselves reverend, but we have 2 years of what they used to call probation and now they call residency.
I
And
was just about to call it probation.
yeah, and I think they made that switch because they're like, let's not like so readily identify them with hardened criminals,
You're
or
ordained unless you mess up.
yes, less than hardened criminals even. Um, however, even in going through the process and approaching my ordination after 2 years, I was still somewhat cynical that, oh, this will be special. My parents will be there. My best friend, who was being ordained in Oklahoma at the time, was one of the people I could invite to lay hands on me. But I didn't
Mm.
really expect to get all of the tingles
Mm.
when I was ordained. And I tell you, the moment the bishop and the cabinet and all the clergy that helped them make decisions and my best friend laid hands on me,
Mm.
it took me somewhere else, which made me think, okay, so I was never in control of this experience to begin with. All right, God, I see you. I
Yeah.
understand. So it
And
really,
to help explain that a little bit for anyone who doesn't know, one of the key moments in an ordination service is what's called the laying on of hands. And again, I'm sure different traditions do this differently, but it is in the UCC. It's all of the clergy who are present, and sometimes other people as well. But yeah, it's at the very least, religious leaders around you lay hands on you or lay hands on each other's shoulders, standing around you, and yeah, and it's this moment of blessing and recognizing. It's like I would say I think it is kind of considered the moment of ordination, right? Like that is
yeah, yeah,
if there's a before and after, that's the dividing moment.
consecration, post consecration.
Exactly.
Boy, we're just throwing out all the churches. So we're gonna try to make this episode not require a lexicon, but if it does, it'll be in the show notes.
Yep.
Um, But yeah, and in the Methodist tradition, then we'll get on to the disability related angle to this, but you do it every year. Um,
Hmm.
you do it at annual conference if you're ordained. And I'm sorry, I took a breath at the wrong moment there. And maybe indicated a pause or a speech pattern thing, but every year the ordination service and the commissioning, ordination and commissioning is a part of annual conference.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
so not only do you have all the clergy that are up on stage with you, and you get to invite clergy that are closest to you and most important to you to come and lay hands on you. You have all of the laity and all of the clergy in the pews that have chosen to come to the service. So it's this very um, deeply impactful moment because you are part of this um, group now, and it means a
Mhm.
lot. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry, I got very caught up in real because since you do it at annual conference, that means you didn't have to plan a whole ordination service, doesn't it?
No, but God, let me tell you, they put you through your okay, you stand here and you
Yeah.
stand there, and that's gonna stand there. And we will take 4 hours if y'all don't calm down and like y'all will be trained by the time this run through is over with. So everybody behave. I don't know. Maybe
Herded like
those,
school children.
yeah. And you're like, you know, some of us are like 29, right? Like
Hmm.
we've
Incredible.
we've been adults for a good while now. But yeah, they can get very and my cabinet liked me. And I
Hmm.
wasn't ordained in the North Texas area. I've heard it gets pretty can get pretty uh draft day boot camp type. All right, we got 2 hours to do this, and let's not the service itself, but just the practice. So
Oh dear.
before I get myself into deep trouble,
Yeah, I wonder if we want from here to talk a bit about the process of ordination and where uh, hurdles can come up specifically for disabled folks. And
yeah,
again, this is going to be different in our two contexts, and then different, far even more different for many other denominations. But the place that I might start is just to name there are still churches out there that will not even consider people with certain disabilities for ministry. Like, you know, there are people that will point to passages in the Hebrew Bible that talk about people with certain physical disabilities being not allowed to be priests and not allowed to approach the ark, and use that to say that disabled folks are just not allowed to go through the ordination process.
yeah,
And you know, you and I are in traditions that, to my knowledge, I mean, I should name that part of the ordination process in the UCC is hyper local. So different groups of churches in different parts of the country can make different decisions about their own ordination processes. So
yeah,
possible that still happens in the UCC, but I would be surprised to find out that it was that blatant. I think that ableism certainly can work its way into the process, and those sorts of histories of disabled people being told that disability by itself is a disqualifier, I think inform that ableism. But I
yeah.
think most places in the UCC are not going to be quite that blatant about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that, to the on the UMC side.
Mhm.
And just as a general principle, I will say that the United Methodist Book of Discipline, which is our rules, book of rules and standards and practice over too many things. Insomnia is a reason to read the Book of Discipline. I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd. I like it. I read it for fun, but I'm I'm really I have a
you
problem in
you
that area.
recognize that you're strange.
Yes, it's a thing. But I should say there have been fairly benign, if not inclusive and pro, like diversity statements about disability and about how disability should not be an excluder or a preventative to ordination for
Hmm.
several years, if not decades, in the UMC.
Hmm.
Uh, but interestingly enough, at the 2020 slash 2024 General Conference, the 2020 General Conference, which is our worldwide governing conference. We come together for 2 weeks every 4 years uh,
Hmm.
from around the world. 2020 took place in 2024 because COVID, and then we could never get it to settle. And then,
Yeah.
but this recent general conference, the last one we had in Charlotte in 2024, was the first time there was a constitutional amendment that
Mm.
stated we will not exclude, um, we will not discriminate against women, and those people with based on ability or not, based on basically disability. They chose the word ability. We had
Hmm.
quibbles with that in the disability committee, but anyway,
Yep.
that's now part of the, like, we're not allowed to discriminate, and those are protected categories. So that is
Nice.
probably going to formalize some things and hopefully give us some room to change some things. Because
Hmm.
as connectional as the UMC system is, which means we're not supposed to be hyper local. We're supposed to be a connected denomination from polity to polity.
Hmm.
Uh, the treatment of those with disabilities through ordination, I know from stories I've heard and from reports of rooms I've been in as a part of a legislative committee who tries to keep an eye on this stuff, can
Hmm.
vary very wildly. There are
Yeah.
ordination committees, and we call them there are boards of ordained ministry for whom disability is not a problem at all.
Hmm.
And there are boards of ordained ministry for whom, even though they won't say it because they're not allowed,
Hmm.
whom disability is a real hurdle. So it
Yeah.
can vary. It can vary quite profoundly.
Yeah, no, and that is very much true in the UCC as well. I mean, I'll name, the UCC also is connected by covenants, and there are national guidelines for how ordination processes are supposed to work, and so there is that connective tissue as well, and still associations can operate very independently, and so how someone is treated and what kinds of questions they get asked and what kinds of requirements get placed on them can vary a lot.
Yeah.
So, for instance, like in the UCC, the question that I heard multiple disabled people have to answer either at their ecclesiastical council or from their committee on ministry, the body assessing them for ordination, is, are you going to be a clergy person first or a disabled person first?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And there's just so much about that question, but like basically it is saying that like somehow being disabled and holding that as an active part of your identity is something that matters to you and that you talk about and that you think about and that you actively use as a lens to look through the world. Something about that is incompatible with being a clergy person.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like it almost seems like a lot of these folks seem to be saying it would be fine as long as you weren't talking about it. Because
Uh-huh.
there was also a committee on ministry that I heard about who was really concerned by how angry the ordinand they were working with was about ableism, and was basically like, you need to work on your anger. And this person was like, I think the world needs to work on ableism, actually. Like, this is
Yeah,
not the sort of anger that is causing harm to people. I'm not lashing out at anyone. I'm not hurting anyone. I am maybe making people uncomfortable when I point out ableism. And that sounds a lot like some certain prophets and a certain Messiah I could point to.
yeah. I am not going to do this directly because we decided to do this topic on too short notice for me to ask permission to use stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that I have had uh, people say to me that they got in their rooms, in their theology rooms, um, like, uh, how does your disability affect your view of God? And then they
Mm-hmm.
gave an answer that for me would to me was fairly coherent. And they got
Mm-hmm.
straight up told they were wrong.
Yikes.
Uh, which again, I don't know how much that has to do with the specific disability and or with the person asking the question being really bad at their job and really
Mm-hmm.
misunderstanding both the reasons and the types of questions that they were empowered to ask.
Yeah.
Um, but still, the fact that a person's embodiment is on such public display anyway, just
Yeah.
like being in the room, and then used as fodder in that sort of exchange is just like, ugh.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. And I'll name, like, I I'm not bringing this topic up, in as my ordination approaches, to complain about my own process, because I really feel like my committee on ministry uh, handled disability and queerness and my polyamory really very well in
yeah,
seeing them as relevant to my ministry and theology to the extent that I feel they're relevant to my ministry and theology.
yeah,
They didn't ask me about how these affect my theology until I talked about it. And and they definitely didn't ask me whether I was going to be a disabled person first or a clergy person first. Um, so it can be done well, is what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't need to go that way, but even in that sense of like the all of the people involved are treating disability as a integrated part of the whole of a person. Even when all
yeah,
of that is going as well as it can be, the overall structures I find still to be pretty flawed. One pretty prime example I will give of that is it is part of the ordination process in the UCC to conduct a psychological evaluation. And I think that's true in a
Huh.
lot of denominations.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but go ahead.
Yeah. And the explanation for why is basically like, we're trying to make sure that the people that we are putting through the ordination process are safe people, basically, are not, people with some underlying desire or tendency to cause harm to the people around them.
Yeah.
And I hear that, and I think that it is important to make sure that people that we are empowering as clergy are responsible with that power. I do
Yeah.
not think that the psychological evaluation does that. I think that people who desire to cause harm and to cause harm as clergy are just going to lie.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're exactly right.
And I think
Uh,
that people who tell the truth, like, I don't think that mostly what you're going to catch is people with different kinds of mental health needs or mental illnesses, which
yeah.
does not tell you whether someone's going to be a danger to people around them.
Becca, I could not agree harder with a statement that came out of this show than what you just said. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll go back to what you said before that. I don't know if we are the exact wrong people to do this episode or exactly right, because I think on the
Mm-hmm.
whole, as a group, you and I have joked about that we kind of feel like awkward and like strange about our disability activist card because when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
ordination, because by and large, relatively we sailed through. Like
Yeah.
I know it took you a long time, and it took me a long time too, and there were definitely disability hurdles to overcome, and we can
Mm-hmm.
talk about how ordination is fundamentally the way it's constructed educationally
Yeah.
and like engagement with the material wise is very ableist naturally in case unless a committee is really committed to adapting to a person's needs, which I've seen, but I've also
Mm-hmm.
seen the other way around.
Yeah.
Uh, we can talk about all that, but relatively
Mm-hmm.
speaking, like a third of my ordination rooms had two or three people in them who knew me since I was like well before puberty, like had known me since I was like 9 years old. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I felt very safe. I felt very understood. I was like,
Mm.
I gave good answers. So I think, you know, we could bring on some disabled friends of ours who've had just like Dante level experiences. Like,
Yeah.
uh,
Seriously.
but that's not us, and that's fine. But I think you're so right uh, uh as we consider the psychological evaluation
Mm-hmm.
as a tool, the way it's constructed, or at least I can speak to the way it was constructed in my day, if I can be an old man on my porch for a minute. Uh, I don't think it does a good job of understanding neurospiciness
Mm-hmm.
as a multidimensional asset.
Yeah.
The conversation can be had about the baseline reasons it's there, which I fundamentally agree with. Like, we can have a conversation about whether it is a working safety tool, but if you just
Hmm.
take the reasons it's there on face value, fine. I get it. I understand why you have something like that in place.
Hmm.
But what I have seen, well, what I have seen is people with neurodivergence and other things that we would consider mental health journeys who
Hmm.
say, who say, yes, I deal with this. And
Hmm.
yes, I do have to control it, quote unquote, control it with medication. But let me tell you what it gives me and the kind of creative
Yes.
insight and the kind of empathetic insight it gives me. That's not understood at all.
No.
Which is which is deeply um, deeply distressing, honestly.
Yeah, very much so. And I also think this is one of these structural pieces that its existence is kind of a problem in and of itself, regardless of how the ordaining body does in fact use it. Because, I think there are a lot of committees on ministry or ordination
Mm.
boards or what have you that will look at the psychological eval a with an open mind. Will look at diagnoses or the possibility of diagnoses and think about the gifts and not jump straight to X diagnosis means this person isn't qualified for ministry.
Yeah.
However, I have known people who have delayed or not gone through ordination at all because they were so afraid of the psychological evaluation, because they
Yeah.
knew that their honest answers would would raise some orange flags at the least, in whether they should or not, they would. And they didn't, I mean, they didn't know how their ordaining bodies would handle that, but also B, like, is it really their ordaining body's business? You
Yeah.
know, like, it, again, we understand the need to try and identify like whether people are going to be safe clergy people, but like, do you need to know the details of someone's depression in order to determine that? I don't really think you do. And
And
so this is literally acting as a deterrent, that there are people that are and will be amazing clergy
yeah.
who just don't think that the church is willing to take them as they are.
And perhaps this is something we do in the future is gather a panel of experts with varying views on ordination from across the board and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in this episode, we basically just brought up these unique circumstances around disability that can make our ordination require a lot more creativity. How would we solve for some of these issues? I would be interested in
Yeah.
that conversation at some point. But I don't think that's not what we're doing today.
Yeah, not today.
But I will tell you just to hang out on the psychological evaluation
Mm-hmm.
for a moment longer. My experience of the psychological evaluation is both hilarious, but with the story I'm about to tell you also perfectly demonstrates what I hope is a softer entryway to this scenario. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I can't read. Like, I'm very, very dyslexic. So I love books. We talked about that a lot on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to hundreds of books a year. I love
Mhm.
literature, but I functionally, physically can't like look at a page and read within it without it taking a really long time.
Mhm.
So doing a written psychological evaluation like they did when I was ordained
Mhm.
a half billion years ago was not going to work. So
Not going to be doable.
what they did is they set me up with a tape recorder
Mhm.
and two tape recorders actually, one of which read the questions to me, and then the other one I recorded my responses. It worked. It was cumbersome, but it worked great.
Oh my goodness.
I'll never forget, as long as I live until I take my last breath, one of the questions was, do you hear voices?
Mhm.
And I was like, I will admit I've heard what I consider to be the Holy Spirit talking to me out loud. I've heard
Mhm.
from what I consider to be Jesus talking to me. Yeah. So I had to answer yes.
Uh-huh.
And I took my time to qualify that answer.
Mhm.
And then I didn't pause the one tape other than a few seconds, but I was close enough from answering one and moving on to the other. The next question was, do you believe in or have you seen monsters?
Huh.
And I could not stop laughing for 45 minutes. And I was like, I guess just one from another. I was completely set up, and
Wild.
I just, what I kept thinking, okay, what does A have to do with B?
Yep.
And two, I mean, what if I answered, yeah, I mean, you know,
Mhm.
so you're setting me up to give you one answer, and I guess the reason I told that story is the only way I've ever seen the psychological evaluation used is not as I said earlier, a creative expander of what's possible in calling and ministry, but as a okay, if you don't answer these ways to these questions, you're done. We're it's over with.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I will tangent on that a little just to know I also had access issues with the psychological evaluation. Um, I was doing mine in 2020 and or maybe 2021, but in a time when we were not doing them in person. So I think it would have been possible for me to go in and do the paperwork with the psychologist. Um, but instead, he mailed me a giant packet of these questionnaires, and I'm just baffled because this is 2021. We have electronic communication that I can use. Like, my
Yes.
access needs would have been met with sending me Word files of these. And he was like, I don't have those. And I'm like, what century are you living in? So
Yeah.
I did all my paperwork with one of my partners, and they read it out loud to me, and I answered, and they wrote my answers. So, that's another problem with the psyche valve. Accessibility, not super there yet.
Although I am interested to see what happens with the psyche valve, a deep lifelong friend and a bottle of wine. I mean, I think that's the way to approach these things.
I will say, my partner may have helped me answer some of the questions when I was like, what do I think about that? And they're like, well, you said this. And it's like, cool, let's go with that.
All right. Well, we're both ordained,
Almost.
so glad for that.
Yeah.
Glad for that. Yes. Um,
But I
Yeah,
do want us to touch on, before we land the plane here, these like structural educational ableism that we talked about, or that we've referenced.
yeah,
And for me, what that looks like is 3 years of very expensive seminary that
yeah,
is very paper writing focused, at least in my experience of it. Um, and then in my denomination, followed by more paper writing.
yeah,
And this is one of those things that, like, I understand the reasoning behind it. In the UCC, and I think in a lot of other traditions, we value an educated clergy because we want the people teaching to know what they're teaching, and we want to make sure that you both have the background of church history and biblical scholarship and theology, but also the training in pastoral care and in being able to support people in building their own theologies. So some form of education, I do believe, is very necessary. And so many people I know almost didn't make it through seminary because the structures of higher education just do not work for all of our brains. I
yeah.
am someone who is very good at school. I always got very good grades, and for whom school is very bad for me. Um, I realized
Oh,
very quickly that pretty much everything about how we structure education is a construct.
yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
actually depends on whether I finish this theology paper or not. No one is materially harmed by it. The thing that is harmed is my grade, which is also a concept. and
yeah,
and somehow, whether I finish this paper or not will determine whether I pass this class, which will determine whether it looks like I've learned the material, which will determine potentially whether I get ordained. And none of that really has anything to do with whether I know the material and whether I'll be a good minister or not. And
yeah,
like it's really tough because, like, I do understand we need ways to assess whether people have learned things, but there there's a whole episode here on ableism in education and higher education in general, right? There
yeah,
are so many more ways to learn than the ways that we typically teach. And there are so many more ways to assess learning than the ways that we typically assess. What I really needed was something practical. I really
yeah,
needed to be doing work that I felt mattered. The only thing that got me through seminary was field education, was the component of seminary that is working in a church or other religious setting and doing the work. I did 2 years of field education, and frankly, I wish I could have done all three.
yeah, right. Um, I would say to me the biggest structural, like educational hurdle that I see currently going on right now is, and thankfully I should say there are new trainings being done by the like folks at the UMC Disability Committee. Uh, and I know that you and I have talked about, like, do we offer ourselves for this? So
Mm-hmm.
there are training opportunities there are people out there and agencies out there that are beginning to train boards of ordained ministry in the Methodist context. This is what a modification is.
Mm-hmm.
This is why they're important. If these people ask for these, um,
Mm-hmm.
you can ask for certain documents like they would provide in school, but it doesn't mean they're cheating if they ask for them.
Yeah.
Uh, because I
Doing
think
something
that,
differently does not need to mean doing it in a lesser way.
yeah, and thankfully that message is starting to penetrate a little bit, but not nearly as much as it should have and could. Like I said before, I know people who have asked for modifications and straight up been told, no, we don't think you need that.
Mm.
Uh, and just, I can't even begin to articulate to you the arrogance of that statement and the ableism inherent in that statement.
Yeah.
So I think that is the biggest hurdle that is still largely outstanding in this for me in this process vis-a-vis disability. But
Mm-hmm.
I would like to piggyback on what you just said. I know people who I'm again not going to mention any names. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
and I love being a clergy person of the United Methodist Church. I love going to conference with my order. I love teaching fellow clergy about disability, and
Mm-hmm.
this is my I'm getting to do a dream come true on several levels. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the Julian way is my dream come true, and being a reverend is my dream come true. It's what I was built to do.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the fact remains, I know people who, on doctrinal standards alone, if they told the truth about what they really believe, would not have gotten ordained.
Mm.
And they knew how to lie, fudge, and massage. And hell,
Yeah.
I'll admit it. I've helped folks that are friends of mine. None recently, but
Mm-hmm.
when I was 20 something and a lot dumber than I am now, uh, I've helped people massage an answer on an ordination. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone does that. Like that. It's why you have people read your paperwork,
Mm.
uh, so that they can go, okay, wait. No, I'm not asking you to lie, but if you say it like this, you're gonna get
Mm-hmm.
orange flag. Maybe you should come at it like this. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think I don't even think there's anything wrong with that necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a part of the revision process. But
But it does highlight that, like,
yeah,
if the like, that makes, like, so much of that part of the ordination process just hoops to jump through, you know? Like,
yeah,
it's not an honest inquiry into what is your theology
yeah,
if you have super definitively wrong answers. And, like, again, like, that's complicated. Like, if someone was like, I straight up don't believe in Jesus, like, you're probably not really cut out to be a Christian pastor.
yeah.
But like, I would still want to ask, like, okay, you don't believe in Jesus. Why do you want to be a Christian pastor? Like,
yeah,
what about this? Explain to me why you're here, and then we can talk more about it. Like, I think there may well be theological reasons not to ordain someone, but, like, it shouldn't need to be a checklist. And granted, this is also coming from me in the UCC, who, like, so much of our thing is not having super strict doctrine. So I know that's going to vary from denomination to denomination. But, like, if what you're, this is reminding me of a economics term of incentives. When you
yeah,
set out things that you want, you may not always get the results that you want. Like,
yeah,
if you have strict doctrinal requirements, you're not necessarily going to get people who adhere to those strict doctrines. What you're going to get is people who know how to massage their paperwork.
And that's the thing. And I should like do, and we're gonna land the plane, I swear. I should do a like on the fly retraction about saying when I was young and dumb. There's nothing dumb about like making sure your paperwork articulates what you believe in a clear, concise, and for the UMC, a doctrinally, consistent manner. I hope people do that all the time. Like that's part of the system we're in. What I have a problem with is what you just said. Oftentimes, let me say this. I more than once in my career as a mentor and spiritual director have I seen people who got through because they knew how to answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked with brilliantly talented and gifted people who got either deferred or straight up denied because they didn't care to like answer the question in the right way. And that is deeply
Or weren't
unfair.
willing to.
Yeah, and you and you and I know you and I know at least one of the people I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the more you lean into how you answer the question matters to whether you get through or not, or can advance to the next check mark, the less you, the more you lean into that, the more you lean away from actually examining someone's heart as a qualification for ministry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll name like getting to this point in the ordination process really feels surreal for me because there were so many times where I did not think I was going to get here. And and they pretty much all have to do with various parts of what we've already talked about. But, one of them was related to my polyamory rather than my disability, that I felt compelled to be honest about who I am and how I love, and
Yeah.
and to speak to that in my theology and in what I wrote and how I presented my ministry. And
Yeah.
I knew that even in the UCC, there was a strong chance that a committee on ministry or an association as a whole would decide that was a wrong answer.
Yeah.
But that's just a bridge too far for our belief that God is still speaking. And I still feel so honored and humbled to find that that's not true, to find that I am in the company of people who can understand my call and even believe that my disability and my queerness and my polyamory are part of it. But
Yeah.
it is just such a reminder that in another system, I'm not willing to make parts of myself smaller for somebody else.
Yeah. And
And
I know.
I can't speak to, since I've never gone through the Methodist process, I can't speak to whether the massaging of my true answers would have felt like a bridge too far for me, but it could have. And so it's so deeply sad to know that people who are being honest, which is what you're supposed to be in this process,
Yes.
are getting denied for not playing the game, basically.
Yeah. And and I think this is a perfect place to end because it started out as a disability conversation, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
in many ways it still is. But as a person that's been ordained for good God, nearly 15 years, 16 years, nearly,
Mm-hmm.
and a person that is just entering the fraternity, as it were, or however you want to phrase that, or the the
Siblinghood.
the sibling. Good job, Becca.
I got you.
It was right there, and I just couldn't find it. The sibling could. My one, uh, like over if I'm on my knees in front of any ordination board or board of ordained ministry or ordinating, which is not a real word, structure in any denomination, ordaining. There we go. See, I did it
Mhm.
again. Is you're asking people to fundamentally share very vulnerable parts of themselves with
Yeah.
you. Like the least we could do, and I'm talking this is the minimum we could do, is
Mhm.
understand that's what's happening.
Yes.
People are being vulnerable with you, whether it's about their physicality, their developmental engagement with the world, their neurospiciness, whatever. They're
Mhm.
being vulnerable with you. The least we can do is, as an ordaining body and group, understand that. And even if we say no, give them the benefit of the doubt and respect their vulnerability. And too often I've just seen that vulnerability absolutely annihilated on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah. I would so fully agree with that. And I think I would just add, like, recognize that the structures of ordination were not built for everyone. Any denomination you can name, you can someone name a denomination to challenge me on this, but any denomination that I've seen, their ordination structures were built for white, able-bodied, heterosexual men who have a wife.
Yeah.
Like, and we could add some more qualifiers to that as well. Okay, I'll amend that. Denominations that are predominantly black or other people of color do not have white as part of that structure, but so many others do, and that is you may not be able to see where the ableism and the queer phobia and the white supremacy shows up in your ordination process, but the people who are marginalized do feel it.
Yeah.
And so when you say, no, we can't make an accommodation, we can't alter this, what you're saying is this process that was not made for you is the right way that it's supposed to be. And you trying to make this process one that doesn't twist you into knots is a lesser way.
Yeah. I mean, let's put it another way, and then we'll conclude the ordination process, and whatever denomination or religious body you speak of is fundamentally designed to keep those in power because that keeps
Yes.
the engine rolling and the structure going. And that's, as someone that, even as I'm an activist and you're an activist,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of reasons for me to like that, because
Sure.
I get paid. I have a job. I have a nonprofit in large part because I am ordained, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to keep getting paid as long as I
Yeah.
need to feed my kids, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, but we should at least be honest about what's being propped up and how that process doesn't serve everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, soapbox climb down.
Thank you for coming to our TED Talk. And thank you for having
Oh,
this conversation with me, Justin.
you are so welcome. And I forgot. See, it can happen to everybody. I forgot. I am on outro.
You are.
Whoops. But again, Becca, you're so welcome. As you can tell, folks, we're both deeply passionate about this topic specifically and creating room for the greatest number of people to breathe and live in the systems that, you know, society requires in general as possible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if you like this show and palsies with palsies in general is intriguing to you or gives you something every time you listen, or even if this is the first time you listen, boy, did you pick an interesting day to join
Welcome.
the fun. Welcome, yes, but go to Apple Podcast, rate us. Um, 4 and 5 stars if you can, 3 stars if you must. It helps people find the show. Writing a review of the show really, really, really helps as well. Um, if you want to suggest a topic to PWP and interact with us or ask questions about a show you previously heard, Becca, I never can remember our email, so this is where I need your help.
pwp@thejulianway.org.
I'm gonna get that like the series finale. I'm gonna nail the email address.
You are. That's how we're gonna know it's time for us to stop.
We're not planning to go anywhere in the
Yeah.
very near future, by the way, folks. Don't worry. But yes, email us. We would love to hear about your ideas for show topics, about feedback about the show. We'd love to communicate with you and know you're listening. And also, if you want to recommend the show to somebody, that helps as well. You can find us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Google Play, any place virtually that fine podcasts can be found. There we will be found as well. And again, we're so glad you joined us today. And as always, go out and put some good into the world, folks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.